Raphael Sanzio, or Raphael Santi, but we know him as Raphael, a Renaissance artist, and he is certainly important to the story of art. Certainly he's Italian, and he has always been acknowledged as one of the key European Renaissance artists. Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Titian. He was working in Italy in the period from 1500 to 1520, High Renaissance, kind of the glory days of art history, certainly to a certain degree. This is a self-portrait as a child, so he had early skills, and the painting is done on poplar. Remember, early paints in this period were often oil on wood. This one is actually tempera on wood. For it to get this miraculous of a realistic quality with tempera is really quite remarkable. A detail of famous Sistine Madonna. I think more than any other of the Renaissance, to a certain degree, he really does some gorgeous mother and child pictures of the Virgin and Child. Also, some of his images of Christ have certainly also been iconic as well. Born in 1483 in Urbino and died in 1520, so just at the end of that so-called High Renaissance. And painter, architect, large figural compositions, some of them really large. Humanistic, Neoplatonic, which means it's looking back to classical Greece and Rome. And his father, according to Vasari, was also a painter, but of no merit. In any case, early on he was producing extraordinary art, and early on he was producing art for important people. This is the Sistine Madonna, 1512 to 13. One of the last Madonnas, but also one of the most famous. Especially the little Raphael angels at the very bottom. A lot of you probably thought that was a painting, just those two angels. Shows up in a lot of things. The detail of that work, just a small portion of that work. I think a lot of people are surprised to find out that that's not a painting all by itself. Painting was commissioned by Pope Julius II, same one who did, of course, the Sistine Chapel ceiling with Michelangelo. This was for an altarpiece in a Benedictine monastery in San Sisto in Piacenza, and includes Saint Barbara and Saint Sixtus. Sixtus IV was the uncle of Pope Julius II. So it was in his best interest to have his family members done well in this. Certainly it glorifies his family as much as it glorifies the church as well. So Saint Barbara was a 3rd century martyr, known to be very beautiful, very religious, and wished to remain a virgin. A patron saint of artillery and mining, her pagan father kept her locked up in a tower so she could not marry anyone unsuitable. He did not want her to convert to Christianity. He, had no interest in helping the poor. But anyway, it's a long, long, horrid story, like a lot of these stories. I think that's one of the things I actually like about art history. There's a lot of storytelling. I guess I was one of those people that never got past tell me a story. But this is the detail of the famous Raphael cherubs, putti, angels, whatever you want to call them. And you notice they even have the little rainbow wings as well. And remember, in another lecture, I talk about the rainbow wings were believed to be associated with peacocks, and peacocks represented the resurrection. because peacock flesh doesn't rot as quickly as other flesh, and also because peacocks get a new set of feathers, and so in a sense they regenerate or resurrect themselves in a way, I guess. And so in the medieval period, there are a number of rainbow wings. The Sistine Angels, these show up in so much images and purses and clocks and lunch pails and posters, and I think everyone has seen this image or owned a part of this image in some way, or seen a card with this image. They are pretty popular and pretty endearing. The one in the top with them looking like they're sitting in a bar is pretty cute. There's some thought, you have probably some psychologists analyzing this. The early loss of his parents may be reflected in the sweet Raphael angels. The cherubs are wistful, looking up the Virgin, and the one on the right is shown in a traditional pose of mourning. The Virgin is on a celestial plane out of reach from the baby angels. So it's one interpretation. I'm not entirely sure I buy it, but it's certainly one interpretation. So apprenticed in 1500, commissioned for an altarpiece. There is a record of that commission. We love that when there's clear records. Commission was to paint the Virgin of Oddi Chapel, a coronation theme. Today it's in the Vatican. So he studied under Perugino and painting frescoes. It said that Perugino's calm, exquisite style was influential. So he worked under another artist, and he goes to Siena and Florence, and another important art center. Certainly the Florentine artists were very much known for their the draftsmanship, whereas Venice was known for colore, or color. And so by 1504, he goes to another artist, and he goes to Siena, he goes to Florence, he's traveling through Italy, and he's learning about different ideas. Other influences are Masaccio and Fra Bartolomeo as well. So this is the crowning of the Virgin, also called the Oddi altarpiece, 1502, 1503, oil, and oil tempera on canvas. So we're getting kind of a mixture of the two, which is interesting. And so here you see these Victorian, the Victorian cherubs, many years later, kind of take their inspiration from these seraphim in the sky here. They're pretty wild looking. In fact, they're certainly simplified forms. And then you have the angels playing music. One of the angels is looking up at the seraphim. And then, of course, you see the crowning of the Virgin. And again, it's just beautiful, very active. And then you also have the little angels peeking out behind the drapery of the Christ figure. So the altarpiece was broken up and sold when the convent in the 1660s sold pieces of the altar to raise money for meat, bread, oil, and wine. When it comes down to it, art gets sold for the necessities. Isabel Stewart Gardner bought the detail from the predella, the base of the altar, called the Pietà section. The Colonna altarpiece lunette, that's that kind of half moon style, God the Father blessing with angels and cherubim, again in the upper part of the frame. And so the semi-circular lunette was once owned by J.P. Morgan. So the details are really quite gorgeous. Now these are the seraphim in Hagia Sophia. And these seraphim, these faces were something that was actually revealed not too long ago. I want to say 5 or 10 years ago. And originally they knew that they were some sort of angel or seraphim. And then when the faces were revealed, they got really excited. I guess that they found those when they were restored, because they'd had these kind of medallions over them. So in any case, they're pretty cool. The Hagia Sophia is medieval. It is in Istanbul. I was all slated to go see it, and then I was going on a cruise, and then they canceled it because there was some major turmoil there when we were scheduled to go a few years ago. So very disappointing, but it's okay. It means I just have to go again later. You have Titian's beautiful white angel, which looks very, very different, and that's 1520s. And then you have the Raphael angels, of course, with their more medieval rainbow wings, and also Northern Renaissance. Jan van Eyck was also using those rainbow wings as well. These are tetramorphs, Eastern Orthodox cherubim that are symbolic of the 4 apostles in angelic form. And the 4 apostles are St. John, the evangelist, Mark, Luke, and Paul. And so you see the ox of St. Luke, the sacrificial ox of St. Luke. You see the eagle of St. John, and then you see the lion of St. Mark. It looks like St. Paul had a more physical appearance here. In any case, the Victorian little cherub there is kind of interesting as well. So this idea of the white angel hasn't been with us for a long time, but certainly I think it has its roots in the Renaissance, certainly, but it's interesting that they come in all different colors. 1504, Holy Family with Lamb. This is at the Prado, and so this is a Raphael. Raphael infants tend to look much more realistic. If you've heard me teach medieval art in this class with you, you know that medieval infants often look like little scrawny old men. They don't look nearly as realistic as they do in the Renaissance. And so of Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Raphael, Raphael was the youngest. He was prolific. He produced a great many works. He was at ease with his genius. Clues to his life have been found in letters and poetry. His father was also a court painter and a poet, so that certainly gave him an in. He was a childhood artist as well. When he was 8, his mother died related to childbirth. He lost his baby sister as well. Another brother also passed away. The date is more unclear. And then Vasari paints this glowing picture of his childhood, and yet both parents died before he was 11. Again, Vasari's pretty wonderful, but he is not to be relied upon. He's one that it's always interesting to see what Vasari has to say about certain things, but just understand you need to dig a little deeper, usually. So this is a tondo. This round format is a tondo. It became popular in the 1400s. Botticelli, relief carvings, medallions, certainly. And Holy Family with palm tree because they were exotic. They're also associated with Palm Sunday and Christ's entry into Jerusalem, which was, of course, part of Holy Week, Holy Easter week. So it has an intimacy, a sweetness. It's kind of beautiful. The circular format kind of brings them all in together. The baby, again, looks pretty natural. And according to legend, Joseph's staff bloomed with lilies as a sign that the Virgin should pick him to be her husband of her many suitors. Masaccio, Florentine artist, influenced by naturalism of Masaccio and Fra Bartolomeo. And certainly this is moving towards like that real realism that we get with the Renaissance, but it's not quite there yet. But certainly the naturalism is much better and much less stiff than the medieval icons. But certainly Masaccio influenced. There's a sweet softness that you see with both of these, Masaccio's and then Raphael. But the definition around the eyes is certainly much stronger with Raphael. Remember, the Virgin is usually shown in blue for Queen of Heaven, or red for the Passion of Christ, the blood of Christ, or white for purity. And so here you see them in Raphael's has that more blood color, and then the other one is more the burgundy and blue for Queen of Heaven. And also the halo is very, very ornate on Masaccio's, almost looking back to the Byzantine past, whereas Raphael's is more delicate and more in the style of Leonardo da Vinci that was doing that really, really delicate halo. He was influenced by such works as Leonardo's Virgin and St. John with the Christ Child. Beautiful, simplicity, elegant, has kind of a muted palette with its grays and light reds. It also has that sfumato, that smoky atmospheric aspect. Also notice that it's triangular, and there's a very, very formal arrangement. This is a feature of more academic paintings from the Renaissance, that triangular construction. That triangular construction is going to kind of stay as one of those academic rules, more traditional rules in painting for centuries, actually. A lot of the academic salons certainly taught it, just because of how it's neatly organized. It's pretty symmetric. And indeed, the Virgin is sitting in the lap of Saint Anne, her mother, and then she's reaching for her child, who is playing with the lamb. And of course, Christ is the Lamb of God, and so you have that symbol there as well. It is a little interesting, though, that the Virgin is literally almost in the lap of Saint Anne. You know, is Saint Anne like on a rock and she doesn't want to sit on the ground, so she kind of leans on her knee? It is kind of an interesting arrangement. Opposite is Fra Bartolomeo, a Florentine artist, and this is the Madonna della Misericordia, and its format is really quite different as well. And but certainly he's kind of taking little things from other people. The baby, I think, is certainly very much one of the influences. You have Da Vinci's baby that looks pretty realistic, but then you also have all of this action going on that you're definitely going to see in Raphael's work. The multi-figured, dramatic, kind of draws you in. You want to know what's going on. So look at Leonardo's work. What is Raphael taking away from Leonardo's work? Certainly, I think his virgins look a little younger than Da Vinci's. And then the infant, I think you see certainly is looking similar to Da Vinci's example. You have the infant is looking definitely realistic. He gets a little lighter and brighter in Raphael's work. Also, Raphael's Madonna of the Pinks, you have what looks to be a pretty young female, and indeed the Virgin was quite young. So Raphael's Madonna of the pinks refers to the pinks, the flowers. And then 1502, the Soli Madonna, that actually refers to the person who owned it, which was Edward Soli. And the Soli Madonna was believed to be produced around 1502 to 1506. The source that I used placed it around 1502. And then again, she appears to be reading from a small Bible. It could potentially be a Book of Hours. That would be like that celebrates the Virgin, of Book of Hours of the Virgin, or again some perhaps the Magnificat, which is part of Mary's song. So there's a few things, and it's not always clear. So the virgins typically have round, sweet faces. They look pretty natural, plump infants. Again, they think that because he lost his mother quite young, there's a strong sense of a search for the mother in his works. Certainly it's possible. There's certainly a strong connection that you see between the mother and the child, in this one especially, I think. And this is at the Norton Simon. And this infant, the expression on his face is very mature. This looks like an infant that has the world on his shoulders. He looks like there's a lot going on in that head of his. And then, according to Sister Wendy, who is an art historian and a nun, and for a number of years she was doing videos and books on art history. She's actually pretty darling. She passed away a few years ago, but she was quite old. And she said the infant looks a little bit like a sumo wrestler, a powerful infant who could even read. And so, yes. But you also have in the background a more contemporary city, Italian city and Italian countryside, and certainly, again, the accessibility that the person who is viewing it might feel more connected with that familiarity. But that said, the Virgin is certainly in more traditional garb, and certainly looking back to the past. But it's just a beautiful work. And again, this is at the Norton Simon. So Soli Madonna. Now the Soli Madonna has that the influence of Leonardo's small, thin halo as well. And you don't have that in the Norton Simon one. 1505, the Madonna del Granduca. The colors in this are so rich. It's like a turquoise blue and burgundy. It's a little different. It also shows Da Vinci's influence as far as the dark background, thin, delicate halo, soft expressions. And this is at the Pitti Palace. That is the repository for this work. And the Pitti Palace is in Florence. Magnificent museum if you get an opportunity to see it. Painted shortly after Raphael came to Florence, and demonstrates this Florentine style. Again, his draftsmanship skills were extremely talented. It belonged to the Grand Duke Ferdinand III of Lorraine, where its name is derived because the Grand Duca, the Grand Duke, shows this poise and this harmony, and again, it's just very, very sweet. I also think it's interesting. Look at the halo of the Christ child. It's in 3 lobes. You can see this pattern of 3. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. The Trinity is demonstrated there in a very delicate, literally delicate way. Raphael's Madonna and Child, the Tempe Madonna. Here she's very, very young. This is Italian High Renaissance. So he goes to Rome and he spends the rest of his life there. Unfortunately, his life was pretty short. He moves to the Vatican in Rome in 1508. And his influential family connections also played a huge part in this, because remember, his father was in the court as well. He was commissioned by Pope Julius II faster than Michelangelo, who had been kept waiting for months after he received an invitation from the Pope. So this didn't go over really well. Michelangelo got very temperamental and very jealous. There was definite rivalry between the artists. Michelangelo did not like this young upstart, not at all. So Madonna of the Chair, this is one of my favorites. It's a truly gorgeous work. It's the colors are rich, the fabrication is rather exotic. She has this kind of loose turban on and this rather exotic fabric, a shawl that she's wearing. This is one plump little baby. This is one healthy little baby. And then right next to him, you see his cousin, John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist would have been close in age to the Christ child, because if you remember from the Saints and Art lecture, there's this moment when the Virgin is carrying the Christ child, and Elizabeth, her cousin, is carrying St. John. And it's called the Visitation, or it's called the Greeting in Christian iconography. And there's this moment when these two ladies come together, and the ladies are celebrating, they're hugging, they're rejoicing. Meanwhile, the babies are lightening or moving in their wombs as well, as if they're greeting each other on some sort of spiritual level as well. So it's a pretty cool moment in art history, especially if you know some of the apocryphal backstory of the event. And so it's often kind of shown this mystical moment between Mary and her cousin and the infants greeting each other. And so here you see that the Christ child and St. John the Baptist are close in age. It's notable that sometimes the St. John the Baptist looks like he's 3 or 4 years old compared to the infant. And that's not the case biblically. If you're following biblical doctrine, they're close in age. He has it right on. He shows them pretty close in age. But again, understand that you're occasionally going to see an older child, and that's called artistic license. But the church probably wasn't delighted with those changes of details, but this is more accurate. And so it's called Madonna of the Chair because you see the edge of that beautiful exotic chair. And so that's why it's called that. It's also sometimes called the Borghese Madonna, since it was originally there. I think it's now at the Pitti Palace, however. But one of the most mature of Raphael's works, certainly one of the more famous of his works, painted in Rome while he was working on the Vatican project, the Stanza fresco. So, and again, this is called a tondo, High Renaissance. The first commissioned work by Raphael in Rome was his biggest and best paint ever. He was to do a fresco in what was to be Pope Julius II's private library in the Vatican Palace. The work is in the Pope's library and is known as the Stanza della Signatura. And this room, this large alcove is called the School of Athens. And it's, again, one of his most famous works. I think I'm going to include a clip on this because it's very involved, and it's nice when they can zoom in and show you the different figures and the different meaning. But he's actually kind of trying to show School of Athens. He's trying to look back to the classical past. He's trying to look back to the great figures of the past, and it even has some kind of fun things in there as well. The man that's leaning his head on his hand like this, and he's kind of pouting, is Michelangelo. So it's believed to be a little bit of a dig, I think. And again, a lot of the other personages are very, very important. So Michelangelo was quite irritated by Raphael's unique skill of absorbing the masters. He even accused the artist of plagiarism. And so here you can see Michelangelo's Prophet Isaiah in the Sistine Chapel, and then you can also see Raphael's Isaiah. Similar but different. I don't know that I get that. I think he's mostly talking about the gesture, his gesture of his arm, and and some of the fabrication. But I think it's different enough that I don't know if he'd have a case if it was in a courtroom today. Raphael, La Fornerina, or the Baker Girl. And so Vasari wrote that Agostino Chigi brought Raphael's mistress to the artist to live with him. This is kind of funny. So he would concentrate on the Farnese frescoes. He was distracted because he was in love. So women were a source of inspiration and nourishment to a very young man, Raphael. Similar problems were mentioned with the creation of other works as well. So I think it's pretty wild that they moved her into the Vatican so that he would focus. So Raphael's kind of gives a little bit of his signature on her armband, almost as if she belongs to me. So a tall tale, but the legend that the artist overindulged with his mistress has served to keep his art alive. I mean, if I teach Raphael and don't mention this one, I'm sorry, I'd be a very remiss art historian. According to Vasari, that is what happened. This view of health is medieval. The body is controlled by humors, by balance, by your fluids being balanced. You don't want to have too much phlegm. You don't want to have too much passion. Everything should be in balance. And so Raphael's was destabilized by too much sex. That essentially it weakened him. But he was also a young man. I don't entirely know what Vasari was thinking about. A recent cleaning revealed a ring, and that has basically opened up more questions. Was she more than a mistress? Or was this a promise ring? Or who knows? But this has definitely added a little bit more interest in the Baker girl. So she's beautiful in a pose once classical and also intimate. She wears this armband or jewelry that proclaims her as his. It's pretty clear. It's not ambiguous at all, really. And she's not a remote, distant nude. She looks approachable. She doesn't look like she is, on some sort of pedestal. But it's a great story, and again, it's not likely to go away any day soon. So he was so in love with his mistress he could not focus. She accompanied him everywhere and was smuggled in to live with him in secret so he could complete his frescoes at the Villa Farnesina. His Sienese banker friend Agostino Chigi was the one that aided this. So in some versions of this legendary story, his mistress is also smuggled into the Vatican to live with him there. That's the one I've heard more of. so that he can finish his frescoes for Pope Leo X. And so, again, the legend continues of essentially this artist dying of too much sex. So yes, and Picasso was absolutely fascinated by the tale. Yeah, this is Picasso. It's no great surprise. And so this is an etching of the story. This man peeking under the covers. You wonder if that's his friend who's snuck her in. So Margherita Luti is thought to be the sitter for La Vallata. She's also the woman in La Foronina. And again, it means the baker girl. And so Raphael's woman with a veil. And both, of course, are pretty famous. I think the second one is a bit more famous, but maybe because, well, she's nude. That might be part of it. But certainly she was quite beautiful. Lucretia, pen and brown ink incised with black chalk using a stylus. I mean, you cannot doubt that he had strong draftsmanship skills. These are beautiful. He also used the metal point technique, using a sharp point of silver to make his sketches. He was quite innovative. He did make prints. He entered into a collaboration with another artist who he allowed him to use his sketches. Again, I think he maybe realized what his gifts were and what he wanted to spend his time doing. Ingres illustrated Raphael's fantasy in a way. As the woman, she is basically his muse. She's providing artistic nourishment to him. And so he basically creates this idea of Raphael with his beautiful mistress. And so he further enhances this art history legend. And so he did 5 versions of it. So it was certainly something that must have had some market value for him to do so many. So Raphael and La Fornerina, this is 19th century, and then the 1814 version is at the Fogg Museum. I think the one at the Fogg Museum is one of the most famous myself. That's the one it seems like I've seen the most of. And then in the background, you can actually see on the first one, you can actually see the work that he was working on right before he died. And that was the Transfiguration of Christ that's at the Vatican. It's huge. It's one of the highlights of the Vatican. People stand in line to see this incredible work. And so Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, Raphael and La Fornerina, oil on canvas, 1827. So he definitely was enamored with the idea of this, as have lots of artists. I mean, certainly Picasso and Ingres, and look at her skin. I mean, in this one, it's just beautiful. Ingres was a neoclassical artist. So if you have a sense that she almost looks sculptural, there's a lot of intent there because she does. She has that almost sculptural look to her. He never married, again. Now we wonder, though, because there is that ring. But he did become engaged to Maria Bibbiena, Cardinal Medici Bibbiena's niece. He wasn't terribly obsessed with this wedding. It was not something that he was excited about. So Maria, in the end, died in 1520, unmarried. And it wouldn't have been as if she could just go and find somebody else. If you were promised to somebody, it really kind of made it complicated sometimes for you to marry someone else, almost as if you were damaged goods somehow, even though it would have just been a betrothal, but indeed was problematic for young women. So the betrothal of Raphael and the niece of Cardinal Bibbiena. And so here you see essentially it's like a contract. And so Angra is imagining this moment, imagining this contract. And this is at the Walters Art Museum. He wrote that he extracted attributes from a number of different women to form an idea. This was necessary, Raphael said, because no woman satisfied his criteria for ideal beauty. I kind of think towards the end of his life he might have found her, though. He certainly appreciated her. The Virgin, again, was painted as idealized and unattainable. But if you look at all of them, is there some coherency to them? I think so. One of them has a significantly rounder face than the others. But overall, there is a definite look to a Raphael Virgin. So, again, supposedly he never got married. And so, at one time engaged, but again, it appears to be more of a strategic union than love, which was often done. It was rumored his numerous romps with his mistresses led to his premature death, but again, not really likely. It's said that he fell ill after a sexual encounter with Ludi. During the next 15 days, he was well enough to write his will, leaving her a huge amount of money. And so this is School of Athens, the image of the philosophy. And so I'm going to show you some of the details, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to also include a clip so they can, it's just a little easier sometimes, I think, when it's several figures. It's a little trickier to teach online. Here we have Plato and Aristotle both holding the other one's book. And so they're having this discourse. It's philosophers, it's these intellectuals. Okay, so this is a diagram of the great thinkers, philosophers, the School of Athens, and some of the identifications. Some of them are argued about. 13, I think almost positively is Michelangelo, because he was known to be moody, difficult. This commission would not have made him happy. You have number 14 appears to be Plato. Could it be Plato, who happens to look like Leonardo da Vinci, kind of a dualism? Entirely possible that he is doing that, yes. 15, Aristotle. Number 18 is Euclid. Again, a lot of these philosophers or mathematics, theory, Pythagoras as number 6. Apelles is that great artist in history that made grapes just so realistic that the creatures would try to eat them, and also was a painter of for instance, figure painting. And so he shows himself as him because he was an important painter. Again, hard to know. Number 7, Alexander the Great or Pericles. I lean towards Pericles just because it's School of Athens. But is it possible it's Alexander the Great? Yes. 12 is Socrates. I think that's probably a pretty good identification from some of the sculptures that we've seen of Socrates. Anyway, there's a number of other ones as well. And here you can see the details. Yeah, I think it's Plato over Leonardo myself, because I think Leonardo would be a little bit younger there. Henry Nelson O'Neill's Last Moments of Raphael, 1866. This is a historical genre work, 19th century, He is imagining the last moments of Raphael. The cardinal is here. His friends are there. Everyone's in despair. You can see at the foot of the bed, you can see part of the transfiguration of Christ. It actually shows it shows the work that he was working on, this huge work, this important work. So the artist falls into a fever, didn't tell his doctors what its caused, so they gave him a wrong cure, which killed him. The illness, again, this is a lot of this is conjecture. The illness lasted 15 days, and he confessed his sins and had last rites and put his affairs in order. He dictated his will and left sufficient funds for his mistress's care. Most of his studio contents went to other artists. At his request, he was buried in the Pantheon. And the Pantheon is a beautiful place to be buried, certainly. And yes, his wish was indeed granted, and he is indeed buried in the Pantheon. But yes, look closely at that painting on the wall. You can see a detail of the transfiguration of Christ. And he's, of course, shown as this beautiful young male as well. So here you can see the lower detail and kind of compare the two anyway. And so it's really a beautiful work that O'Neill created in the 19th century, but it does kind of wraps into my lecture very nicely, so I liked it because it kind of gives us a window into what the world might have been like in the last days of Raphael. So the Transfiguration of Christ, High Renaissance, perhaps one of his most important work. Certainly a lot of people would say it's one of the most important works in the entire world. I mean, it is popular. When I've seen it, it's several people deep, and it's really hard to get close to. So you have at the top, you have Moses and Elijah, Old Testament, and then you have right below them, you have James, Peter, and John, the apostles, and then you have Justus and Pastor. These were saints that had the same feast day as the Transfiguration. And they would have been very, very literate in all these details. They would know these details, a lot of the viewers anyway. And then in the bottom corner, Matthew or Andrew, some of those are disputed. You have the apostles and the possessed child. The beautiful woman that looks like a sculpture who's on her knees, some have thought may be the Magdalene. She may just also be a beautiful woman because he liked beautiful women. So in any case, and then through the middle, the symbols of faith, hope, and love is believed to be right in there. So, I mean, it's so detailed, it's so much going on, but of course the key thing that's going on is Christ is being transfigured. He's lighting up, and it's very, very clear that, he is the Son of God. And so it's this moment of revelation. And so Mount Tabor, Galilee, Israel, he's transfigured and revealed to 3 apostles. And again, it's this moment of wonder and awe. But it's interesting how it's kind of divided into 3 parts. But it's huge. So she's also in an interesting contrapposto posed. That's that slight S to show the skill of the painter or the sculptor, this S curve, which means weight shift. So cartoon of St. Philip or St. Andrew, and study of apostle, black charcoal, white heightening, and pouncing marks. Pouncing marks are little marks that were actually made in the cartoon to kind of transfer it, and it was a means of transferring these cartoons to a work. So sometimes you actually can see these tiny marks. So in his life of Raphael, Giorgio Vasari recounts the events immediately following Raphael's death. As he lay in the hall where he had been working, they placed at his head a picture of the Transfiguration, which he had done for Cardinal de' Medici. And the sight of this living work of art, along with his dead body, made the hearts of everyone who saw it burst with sorrow. He was dramatic, certainly, but again, we still love Vasari. How can you not? But in any case, understand that he was writing past Renaissance, and so he's a little bit reliant on some tales, and he's probably filled in a few blanks, kind of like Hollywood does when they do a documentary. So Raphael was buried in the Pantheon, and this is the tomb of Raphael, and he's shown fittingly enough above him with an image of Virgin and Child. How appropriate is that? I mean, those are his key works. And according to a 16th century scholar, this is what was inscribed on his tomb. Here lies Raphael, by whom nature feared to be outdone while he lived, and when he died, feared that she herself would die. So this is inscribed on his tomb. And when we talk about whom nature feared to be outdone, when we talk about somebody painting from nature, it means that he's actually looking at something and painting something and making it look super, super real, super realistic. And so the Pantheon, beautiful, not very far from the Vatican. As you enter the Pantheon, the word Pantheon means many gods, and it was dedicated to many gods. It was dedicated to many Greco-Roman gods, not Christian icons, but it was later changed over, and it's now a Roman Catholic Church. And it's still, there's still services there, not very large ones because it's not a huge building, but there are services there, and as long as you're quiet and you can kind of pass through the area. I think there was service going on one time when I was there. In addition, it has an oculus at the very top. I want to say it's around 28 feet across. It's huge. Doesn't look huge in there, but at the very top it's this open circle, and at the summer solstice, which is June 21st, the light is said to come through the oculus and just basically go straight out the front door of the Pantheon. So there was a real awareness of the summer solstice and where it fit in the celestial world, I guess. And I saw it on June 22nd for the first time, and it's pretty cool. The light comes right in. It does go right out the window. Mind you, I missed it by a day, which all that meant was that I missed the crowds. So it wasn't as crowded on the 22nd, and certainly one day doesn't make that much difference. It's still the summer solstice, or pretty close. So I hope you learned a little bit about Raphael, and again, I think he's a gorgeous painter, especially a painter of the Virgin and Child.